White Christmas by Valena Minor Williams. This was written and published in 1953. White Christmas. It was beginning to snow, but young Thomas didn't even seem to notice. Uncle Charlie was worried about his 10-year-old nephew. 10 was a hard age for a boy if he had a daddy, and even if he wasn't colored. Uncle Charlie watched John Thomas grow more and more quiet, and he knew what that meant. It meant that the boy's world was constantly falling into two categories: the right or the wrong, the good or the bad, and most important to young John Thomas these days, the white or the colored. 10 is the age when most youngsters are taught there is something wrong with being colored. "Look at that silly old Santa Claus," John Thomas sneered. "Pasty-faced old goat, I hope he freezes." The two passed the street corner Santa, but the boy's attack continued. "I'm sick of white Santa Clauses. Ain't there no colored ones nowhere?" The boy didn't expect an answer to his question. A hard struggle. Charlie thought about his sister Ophelia. She had done the best she could with the boy since her husband had died. She'd done days' work so the youngsters would always have a clean place to live, enough to eat and clothes to wear. But she hadn't taken much time out to explain things to him. She hadn't been able to cancel out the hard words that John Thomas was learning in school. The epithets and the talk of slums, disease, dirt, and poverty that he was beginning to think were all part of being colored. Ophelia accepted her lot. Charlie could see John Thomas did not. He had seen the hurt in the sensitive child's face when once Ophelia had sighed wearily after a hard day's work. "It's a white man's world, all right. Nothing for no one else." That's one reason Charlie had, year after year, taken John Thomas to the Christmas parties given at the exclusive country club where he worked. He wanted the boy to see beautiful surroundings. Charlie had been a maitre d' for a hotel for nearly 25 years, and no one minded his bringing his big-eyed little nephew for the holiday festivities. And Charlie had plans for the boy's future. Did not want to go. There was always a towering, brightly lighted tree, a Santa whom everyone knew was the chef, and lots of presents for everyone. The first year John Thomas went, his eyes had lit up and he loved every moment of the brief wonder world. Now he didn't want to go with his Uncle Charlie anymore. Uncle Charlie couldn't be expected to understand how he felt. This club was his world. Maybe his name should have been Uncle Tom instead of Uncle Charlie. That's all he is with his bowing and scraping to those big white folks, the boy thought savagely. John Thomas didn't want any of that charity handed out to him. He came in through the kitchen, so he didn't really belong at any party with millionaires' brats. Too much spirit. The kids were nice enough, he admitted to himself grudgingly. It was the club's members who stopped in to look at their children after a quick trip to the bar. They were the ones who rubbed his head for luck or called him Sunshine or Snowball. Last year, one flipped him a quarter to buy himself a Cadillac. They were just full of too much Christmas spirits, Uncle Charlie had explained, but it hurt anyhow. "Here we are," John Thomas' Uncle Charlie's voice broke through the boy's dark thoughts. They were at the side door of the club. "We're not going in through the kitchen." "No, we can go in on the side. You go on and play with the children. You know one of the ones your age. I'll be in after I see how things are going." "I'll go with you, Uncle Charlie," the boy said quietly. Just let his uncle know he knew where he really belonged. The chef's sick. Uncle Charlie shrugged wearily. After hanging up their coats, they went into the warm, high-ceilinged kitchen. The long serving tables were cleared of all other food except trays of sandwiches and cookies, and there was a steaming kettle of cocoa on the huge range. Party fare for the youngsters. But no one was there except Mr. Jenkins, the club president. He looked terribly upset. The children are all out there singing and waiting for Santa Claus to appear, Charlie. And Chef's gone home sick. Who in the world can we get to play Santa? Mr. Jenkins held the bright red Santa suit in his hand and kept peeking through the tiny windows in the kitchen door as if he could actually see the children in the assembly room. Chef sick? Uncle Charlie asked. Nothing short of near death itself would keep him away from these Christmas parties. He's been playing Santa for how many years is it, Mr. Jenkins? No matter now, Charlie. No matter. We've got to find another Santa and quick. A bright idea. Well, Mr. Jenkins, you could, Uncle Charlie began. Me? Mr. Jenkins threw his despairing hands out in a gesture that made Charlie and his nephew realize that Mr. Jenkins could not have weighed more than 100 pounds. But you, Charlie, yes, indeed, you could play Santa, Mr. Jenkins exulted. But no buts about it. Here, let's hustle you off. The children are waiting. In seconds, the white jacket maitre d' of the hotel was transformed into a brilliant red Santa. John Thomas couldn't believe his eyes. A colored Santa Claus, and in this exclusive club. His chest began to swell pridefully. The mask. Mr. Jenkins was delighted. He made appreciative little clucking sounds as he adjusted the belt. And your nephew can be Santa's helper, Mr. Jenkins said expansively. Oh, yes. Charlie, here's your mask. He handed Uncle Charlie the pasty white mask from which steamed and snowy yak hair beard. John Thomas lowered his eyes. Uncle Charlie wasn't going to be a colored Santa Claus. He was going to pass for a white Santa. Charlie saw the change of expression in his nephew's eyes. He held the mask in his hands, and Mr. Jenkins pushed him through the door. I'll call you in a minute, John Thomas, he said, lifting the mask to his face. You're going to help me now, you know. John Thomas didn't answer. Suddenly, the ache in his body was too heavy to bear. If there couldn't even been a colored Santa Claus, then there couldn't be a colored mayor, a president, or a colored police chief, or a 4-star general. Tears brimmed in his eyes, and he fought manfully to keep them from spilling down his tight little cheek. Loving Santa. The muffled shouts of the joyous children came through to him. Santa! Santa! We love you, Santa! They loved Santa all right, but not Uncle Charlie, who was underneath, passing. Suddenly, someone burst through the door. It was one of the youngsters John Thomas remembered from the other parties. His eyes were shining bright. Your uncle says to come on. We're going to help pass out the parents, and some of the other kids are going to help pass out the food out. Chef's sick, you know. Say your Uncle Charlie sure makes a keen Santa Claus. How did you know it was Uncle Charlie? The boy pulled John Thomas to his feet toward the gala in the assembly room. Therefore, a tree that towered almost to the ceiling stood Uncle Charlie. He was dressed as Santa Claus, all right, but there was no mask over his beaming brown face. The children clung to his legs and pulled at him. What had happened? Then he heard his uncle's voice. There are my helpers. Come on, boys. The presents are high and the children are waiting. And John Thomas was swept into the holiday mood. The party ends. Finally, the party was over. The last present had been opened, and the last marshmallow and the last cup of cocoa had been captured. The children were gone home. John Thomas stood close to his uncle. What would they do to him for going out like that, without a mask? What would the club men think of the colored Santa Claus? Maybe they'd even fire Uncle Charlie. The boy would not have his uncle's side. A fierce new pride burned in him. There was Mr. Jenkins coming. Uncle Charlie was packing away the Santa suit. Mr. Jenkins was solemn. He held out his hand to Uncle Charlie. "Nice job, Charlie. Nice job. That was a pretty fine speech you made about Santa Claus representing the brotherhood of man and the love for little children. The best thing. Taking the mask off was the best thing you could have done. You made the children understand what Christmas really is." His voice was warm and a little tremulous around the edges. He looked straight into Uncle Charlie's eyes and he went on quietly. "You've got me believing in Santa Claus again myself." The two men shook hands and Mr. Jenkins turned to John Thomas. "Your uncle's already gotten his Christmas bonus from the club, and I know he wouldn't take his money from being Santa Claus, so I'm going to give it to you, John Thomas. Save it for your college education, son. Your uncle told me how he's saving to help you through. God bless you both. Merry Christmas." He pressed the crisp bills into the boy's hand and was gone. The kitchen was strangely silent. Uncle Charlie wrapped a few sandwiches up. "We're to take some home to Mama?" The boy nodded eagerly. A few hours ago, he wouldn't have been caught dead taking a thing home from this kitchen. Now he wanted to share as much of this magic afternoon with his mother as he could. White Christmas approaches. The two shrugged into their coats and Uncle Charlie closed the outside door behind him and making sure the kitchen area was locked up. A moist snowflake brushed John Thomas's warm cheek. He held out his hand to catch a few. "Looks like we're going to have a white Christmas," he said, making small talk and falling in his uncle's long stride. "Is that good or bad, John Thomas?" John Thomas smiled because he knew his uncle was not asking about the weather. "I guess it depends on how you look at it, huh, Uncle Charlie?" Uncle Charlie got his hand on the boy's shoulder as the pair trudged out of the driveway. A great weight was lifted from the man because he knew now that John Thomas understood many, many things. He had given the boy back his self-respect, a present that would grow with the youngster for all the Christmases to come.